Whisperer. Sleep stories from history. A. Welcome to a glimpse into the rich and ancient history of Tibet. Situated on a high altitude plateau, Tibet has a long and fascinating history that stretches back thousands of years. From the early nomadic tribes that roamed the vast grasslands of northern China and Mongolia, to the rise of the Tibetan Empire in the 7th century, and the spread of Tibetan Buddhism throughout Asia. The culture of Tibet is as diverse as it is complex, with a deep reverence for nature, a rich tradition of art and architecture, and a unique spiritual tradition. Tibetan culture has captured the imaginations of people around the world. In this exploration of ancient Tibetan culture, we will delve into the history, art, and religion and everyday life as we seek to understand the unique and enduring legacy of this remarkable civilization. Join me as we embark on a journey of discovery into the heart and soul of ancient Tibet and its medieval culture that we will unfortunately never be able to witness in person since the attempted erasing of its rich cultural history by its neighbor China. The only remaining video and photographic evidence of the original Tibetan culture can be witnessed in our journey through rare archival footage. So please, sit back, relax, close your eyes, and get into a comfortable position as we take a trip back in time to ancient Tibet. Tibet, the land of snow-capped mountains, lush green valleys, and ancient monasteries, is a region in the Himalayan mountains of Central Asia. The culture of Tibet has been shaped by its unique geography, religious beliefs, and historical development. The geography and topography of Tibet are unique and have played a significant role in shaping the culture and way of life of Tibetan people. Tibet is located on the Tibetan Plateau, which is the largest plateau in the world. The average elevation of the plateau is over 4,500 meters above sea level. Tibet is colloquially known as the roof of the world. The Tibetan Plateau is surrounded by some of the world's highest mountain ranges, including the Himalayas to the south, the Kunlun Mountains to the north, and the Karakoram Range to the west. These mountains act as natural barriers that have isolated Tibet from the rest of the world for centuries. The plateau is crisscrossed by numerous rivers, including the Brahmaputra, Indus, Mekong, and Yangtze rivers, which have carved out deep valleys and gorges over time. The topography of Tibet is characterized by vast expanses of grasslands, barren deserts, and towering peaks. The northern part of the plateau is mostly desert, while the central and southern parts are covered by grasslands and forests. The eastern part of the plateau is the most densely populated and fertile, with a more temperate climate. The extreme altitude and harsh climate of Tibet have also had a significant impact on the lives of the Tibetan people. The thin air and cold temperature make it difficult for people to breathe and survive without specialized adaptations. However, Tibetan people have adapted to their environment over time, developing a unique culture, language, and way of life that reflects their connection to the land. The geography and topography of Tibet are essential factors that have shaped the cultural and history of the region. The rugged terrain and isolation from the outside world have contributed to the resilience and independence of the Tibetan people, while the majestic landscapes and natural wonders continue to inspire and awe visitors from around the world. The Himalayas is a mountain range located in South Asia, extending approximately 2,400 kilometers from Afghanistan in the west to Bhutan in the east. It is the highest mountain range in the world, with many peaks rising above 8,000 meters, including Mount Everest, the highest peak on Earth. The Himalayas were formed by the collision of the Indian and Eurasian tectonic plates, which began around 50 million years ago. The collision caused the land to rise and form the towering peaks and deep valleys that characterize the region today. The Himalayas are not just a geological wonder, but also a significant cultural and spiritual symbol for people across South Asia. The region is home to many indigenous communities, including the Sherpa, the Bhutia, and Tibetan people, who have adapted to the harsh mountain environment and developed unique cultural traditions over time. The Himalayas also have religious and spiritual significance for the people of the region. Many of the world's major religions, including Hinduism, Buddhism, and Islam, have roots in the Himalayas. The region is also home to many important pilgrim sites, including Mount Kailash in Tibet, which is considered sacred by Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains. The Himalayas also play a crucial role in the region's climate and ecology. The mountain range serves as a natural barrier, preventing the monsoon winds from the Indian Ocean from reaching the interior of Asia. The resulting climate variations have created a diverse range of ecosystems, from tropical rainforests to alpine meadows. However, the Himalayas are also facing significant environmental challenges, including deforestation, soil erosion, and climate change, which threaten the region's biodiversity and the livelihoods of millions of people who depend on the mountains for their survival. Overall, the Himalayas are a complex and multifaceted region that have played a significant role in shaping the cultural, spiritual, ecological, and geological history of South Asia. The arrival of the ancient Tibetan people in the Himalayas is shrouded in mystery and legend. The Tibetan people have a long and rich cultural history that dates back over 4,000 years, and their migration to the Himalayas is a central part of that history. According to traditional Tibetan folklore, the first Tibetan people were descended from a monkey and a demoness who fell in love and had 6 children. These children were raised by a hermit and eventually became the first Tibetans. While this story is not based in fact, it speaks to the ancient belief that Tibetan people had a divine origin. Historically, the Tibetan people are believed to have originated in the vast grasslands of northern China and Mongolia. They were a nomadic people who herded sheep, yaks, and other livestock, and they developed a unique culture that emphasized spiritual practice, community, and the environment. At some point in their history, the Tibetans began to migrate southward into what is known as the Tibetan Plateau. This region is located at an average altitude of 14,000 feet and is surrounded by some of the world's tallest mountain ranges. The migration into the Himalayas was likely a gradual process that occurred over many centuries. Tibetan people were drawn to the region for its wealth of natural resources, including the fertile valleys, rivers, and mineral deposits. They also saw the Himalayas as sacred, a spiritual place. Many Tibetan monasteries and temples were built in the region over time. Despite the challenges of living in such a high altitude and rugged environment, Tibetans were able to adapt and thrive. They developed a fascinating culture that blended elements of Tibetan Buddhism, shamanism, and traditional nomadic practices. They also developed a deep respect for the natural world and saw the Himalayas as a symbol of the interconnectedness of all things. Today, the Tibetan people continue to live in the Himalayan region, and their culture remains a vibrant and important part of the world's spiritual heritage, while the details of their migration into the Himalayas may never fully be uncovered. First encounter. The first encounter between Tibet and European culture occurred in the early 18th century, when Jesuit missionaries from Portugal and Italy began to travel to Tibet in an effort to spread Christianity. The Jesuits encountered significant challenges in their attempts to convert the Tibetans, as Buddhism was deeply rooted in Tibetan culture and society. However, they did succeed in establishing a number of missions in Tibet, and in introducing Tibetans to Western science and technology. One of the most notable Jesuit missionaries in Tibet was Ippolito Desideri, an Italian Jesuit who arrived in Tibet in 1716. And Desideri spent many years in Tibet, studying the language and culture and attempted to convert the Tibetans to Christianity. He also made important contributions to the study of Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan culture, producing a number of works that are considered valuable sources of information about the region. Desideri's encounter with Tibetan culture was not always peaceful. He faced significant opposition from the Tibetan authorities, who viewed his efforts to convert the Tibetans as a threat to their traditional religious and cultural practices. Despite these challenges, however, Desideri's work helped to pave the way for future European exploration and engagement with Tibet. Overall, the first encounter between Tibet and European culture was marked by both curiosity and conflict. The Jesuit missionaries who traveled to Tibet were driven by a desire to spread the religion of Christianity and expand European influence. They also made important contributions to the study of Tibetan culture and society. Their encounters with the Tibetans were marked by a mixture of cooperation and resistance, highlighting the complex and often fraught nature of cross-cultural encounters. The British. The first significant encounter between Tibet and the British occurred in the early 19th century, when British colonial forces began to expand into the Indian subcontinent and sought to establish trade relations with Tibet. In 1792, a British mission led by George Bogle was sent to Tibet in an effort to establish diplomatic and commercial relations with the Tibetan authorities. Bogle was received cordially by the Tibetans, and the mission was able to establish a trading post in Tibet. However, subsequent attempts by the British to expand their presence in Tibet were met with resistance. The first modern encounter with Western culture occurred in 1903. A British military expedition led by Francis Younghusband was sent to Tibet to force the Tibetans to open their borders to British trade and influence. The expedition encountered significant opposition from the Tibetan authorities, and a brief but bloody conflict ensued. The British ultimately emerged victorious in the conflict and were able to establish a trade relationship with Tibet. However, the conflict left a deep scar on the relationship between Tibet and the British, and helped to sow the seeds of mistrust and animosity that would eventually lead to the Chinese takeover of Tibet in the 1950s. The British were driven by a desire to expand their influence and access new markets, while the Tibetans were motivated by a desire to maintain their independence and traditional way of life. These competing interests ultimately led to a confrontation that would have profound implications for Tibet's future. Tibet has long been regarded as a cultural and spiritual hub of the world due to its unique blend of Buddhist philosophy, indigenous beliefs, and diverse artistic traditions. Tibetan culture has played a significant role in the spread and evolution of Buddhism, which originated in India and later spread throughout Asia and beyond. One of the most significant contributions of Tibetan culture to Buddhism is the development of the Vajrayana tradition, also known as the Diamond Vehicle. This tradition emphasizes the use of visualization, meditation, and ritual to achieve enlightenment, and had a profound impact on the practice of Buddhism around the world. Tibetan culture is also known for its artistic traditions, including Thangka painting, wood carving, sculpture, and music. Tibetan art is characterized by intricate designs, vibrant colors, and spiritual symbolism, which reflect the deep spiritual and philosophical traditions of the region. In addition to its artistic and spiritual contributions, Tibet is also known for its natural beauty and biodiversity. Overall, the significance of Tibet as a cultural and spiritual hub of the world lies in its unique blend of spiritual, artistic, and natural traditions, which continue to inspire and enrich the lives of people around the world. The cultural heritage of Tibet is an essential part of the world's shared history and a reminder of the power and resilience of human creativity and spirituality and the interconnectedness of all human beings. The Yarlung Dynasty. The Yarlung Dynasty was a powerful ruling dynasty of Tibet that emerged in the 2nd century CE and lasted until the 9th century CE. It is also known as the Yarlung Cree clan, named after the region of Yarlung in the southern part of Tibet, where the dynasty originated. According to the Tibetan tradition, the first king of the Yarlung dynasty was Nyatri Tsempo, who is said to have descended from heaven and ruled Tibet for 33 generations. However, the historical accuracy of these early legends is uncertain. The Yarlung dynasty played a significant role in shaping the political and cultural history of Tibet. They established a centralized monarchy with the king as the head of government and religion, and developed a sophisticated administrative system that included the appointment of ministers and officials. During the Yalung period, Buddhism began to spread throughout Tibet, and many important Buddhist texts were translated into Tibetan. The dynasty also supported the construction of many important religious sites, including the Jokhang Temple in Lhasa, which remains a major pilgrimage site for Buddhists today. The Yalung dynasty also had a significant military power and frequently engaged in warfare with neighboring kingdoms, including the Chinese Tang dynasty and Nepalese Licchavi dynasty. They established a vast empire that extended beyond Tibet and into parts of China, Nepal, and India. In the 9th century, the Yalung dynasty was overthrown by the rise of the rival regime of the new Tibetan Empire, also known as the Tupo dynasty. The new Tibetan Empire continued many of the political and cultural traditions of the Yalung dynasty and became one of the most powerful empires in Asia during its height. The Yalung dynasty was a crucial period in the history of Tibet, during which many of the foundations of Tibetan culture, religion, and politics were established. The dynasty's legacy can still be seen today in the cultural heritage and political traditions of Tibet. The Mongols. The Mongol takeover of Tibet occurred in the 13th century, when the Mongol Empire under the leadership of Genghis Khan began to expand its territories across Asia. Tibet was at the time ruled by the Sakya dynasty, which had established a close relationship with the Mongols through political and religious alliances. In 1240, the Mongols invaded Tibet and defeated the local armies, establishing their control over the region. The Sakya rulers were allowed to continue their reign as vassals of the Mongol Empire, but had to pay tribute to the Mongol rulers and participate in the military campaigns. The Mongol takeover of Tibet also had a significant impact on the region's political and religious landscape. The Mongol rulers were tolerant of different religious traditions, including Tibetan Buddhism, and provided support for the construction of many religious sites and institutions. During the Mongol period, many Tibetans traveled to Mongolia and other parts of Central Asia to study Buddhism and other subjects. This led to the development of new schools of Buddhist thought and the establishment of a network of monasteries and religious institutions across the region. However, the Mongol takeover of Tibet also had some negative consequences. The region was often caught up in conflicts and the power struggles of the Mongol Empire, with Tibetans being conscripted into the Mongol army, leading to periods of instability and violence. After the collapse of the Mongol Empire in the 14th century, Tibet became a center of political and religious power in its own right, with the rise of the Dalai Lama as the spiritual and political leader of the region. The legacy of the Mongol takeover can still be seen in cultural and religious traditions of Tibet today. The Qing Dynasty. The Qing Dynasty ruled over Tibet from 1720 to 1912 AD. During this period, the Qing emperors maintained a complex relationship with the Tibetan government and religious leaders. The Qing dynasty first established control over Tibet in 1720 following a military campaign led by the Manchu general Fu Kanggan. Qing emperors saw Tibet as an important strategic and economic asset and sought to incorporate it into their empire as a protectorate. However, the Qing rulers also recognized the unique cultural and religious traditions of Tibet and sought to preserve them. They allowed the Dalai Lama and other religious leaders to continue their spiritual and political roles and work, provided support for the construction of monasteries and other religious institutions. The Qing dynasty also established a system of government in Tibet that was designed to preserve the authority of the Dalai Lama while ensuring the Qing control over the region. This system was known as dual system of government and involved the appointment of a Qing-appointed resident commissioner who worked alongside the Tibetan government. Despite these efforts to maintain stability and preserve Tibetan culture, the Qing dynasty rule over Tibet was not without controversy. There were frequent clashes between Qing officials and Tibetan leaders, and tensions often arose over issues of taxation and land ownership. In the late 19th century, as the Qing dynasty began to weaken, the relationship between Tibet and the central government in Beijing became increasingly strained. This led to a series of uprisings and rebellions, culminating in the 1912 overthrow of the Qing dynasty and the establishment of the Republic of China. The Qing's dynasty rule over Tibet was a complex and often contentious period in the region's history. While the Qing emperors sought to preserve Tibetan culture and tradition, their efforts were often undermined by political and economic tensions and by the broader political instability of the period. Buddhism. Buddhism has played a fundamental role in shaping the culture, religion, and way of life in Tibet for over a millennium. The arrival of Buddhism in Tibet in the 7th century marked a major turning point in the region's history and had a profound impact on the development of Tibetan culture and society. Over the centuries, Buddhism became deeply integrated into Tibetan life, and the teachings and practices of Buddhism became central to Tibetan identity. Buddhism influenced every aspect of Tibetan culture, from art and literature to medicine and governance. One of the most significant contributions of Buddhism to Tibetan culture was the development of the Tibetan language. Padmasambhava helped to translate Buddhist scriptures into Tibetan, which played a crucial role in establishing Tibetan as a written language. Translation of Buddhist texts also helped to promote literacy and education in Tibet and became a key component of the region's intellectual and cultural life. The translation of Buddhist texts also helped to promote literacy and education in Tibet and became a key component of the region's intellectual and cultural life. Buddhism also had a profound impact on Tibetan art and architecture. Tibetan Buddhist architecture is also characterized by its grandeur and complexity. Many monasteries and temples featuring ornate carvings, colorful murals, and other decorative elements. In addition to these cultural contributions, Buddhism has also played a significant role in shaping Tibetan religious and spiritual practices. Tibetan Buddhism is known for its emphasis on meditation, mindfulness, and compassion, and for its use of rituals and ceremonies to promote spiritual growth and enlightenment. Overall, Buddhism has played a central role in shaping the identity and culture of Tibet. Its influence can be seen in every aspect of Tibetan life, from language and art to religion and philosophy. It continues to be a vital and enduring part of Tibetan culture today. The Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama is the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism and the head of the Tibetan government in exile. The Dalai Lama is considered to be the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, and is believed to be responsible for promoting the welfare of all sentient beings. The title Dalai Lama was first bestowed on a Tibetan monk named Sanam Gyatso in the 16th century by the Mongol ruler Altan Khan. Since then, there have been 14 Dalai Lamas in total, with the current Dalai Lama being the 14th. The Dalai Lama plays a significant role in the religious and political life of Tibet. He is considered to be the spiritual leader of all Tibetan Buddhists, and many people in Tibet and around the world look for him for guidance on matters of morality and spirituality. In addition to his spiritual leadership, the Dalai Lama has also been a key political figure in the history of Tibet. The Dalai Lama traditionally served as the head of the Tibetan government and was responsible for making decisions on matters of governance, diplomacy, and defense. However, following the Chinese occupation of Tibet in 1959, the Dalai Lama was forced to flee to India. He escaped by disguising himself as a common soldier, dressed in military fatigue, where he was smuggled out of the country to India, establishing a government in exile. The Dalai Lama has continued to advocate for the rights of Tibetans and for greater autonomy for Tibet, and has become a symbol of Tibetan struggle for independence. The Dalai Lama is also known for his teachings on compassion, nonviolence, and interfaith dialogue. He has written numerous books and given many lectures on these subjects, and has become a respected voice in the global discussions on issues such as peace, human rights, and environmentalism. The Dalai Lama is a highly respected figure in Tibetan culture and religion, and his influence extends beyond Tibet to the broader global community. The process of choosing the Dalai Lama as the spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism is steeped in Tibetan religious and political tradition. Traditionally, The process of identifying and selecting the next Dalai Lama involved a complex series of rituals and tests. Historically, the selection of the Dalai Lama involved a search for a child who exhibited certain characteristics believed to be those of a reincarnated Lama. When the previous Dalai Lama passed away, a group of high-ranking lamas, officials, and representatives of the Tibetan government would undertake a search for the next incarnation. They would look for a child who exhibited signs such as being able to recognize objects that belonged to the previous Dalai Lama, and being able to identify people and places from the previous Lama's life. Once a child has been identified as the likely reincarnation, the child would be brought in a grand procession to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, to undergo a series of tests to confirm his identity. The most famous of these tests was the Cho Yan test, in which the child was presented with a selection of objects, some of which belonged to the previous Dalai Lama, and others which did not. If the child could correctly identify the objects that belonged to the previous Dalai Lama, this was seen as a sign of his legitimacy as the next incarnation. After the child was confirmed as the reincarnation of the Dalai Lama, he would undergo a rigorous education in Tibetan Buddhist philosophy, theology, and practice, under the guidance of senior lamas. This education would prepare him to take on the role of the spiritual and temporal leader of the Tibetan people. However, since the Chinese invasion of Tibet in 1950, the process of choosing the Dalai Lama has been heavily politicized. Current Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso, stated that he will not be reincarnated in a situation where Tibet is not free, and that he will never be reincarnated in a form that is recognized by the Chinese government. This has raised concerns about the future of the Dalai Lama institution, as well as the future of Tibetan Buddhism in general. The Chinese government has long sought to exert its control over the process of selecting the Dalai Lama. They have argued that the selection of the Dalai Lama is an internal matter of China, and have attempted to assert their authority in the process. In 1995, the Chinese government selected their own candidate for the Panchen Lama, another important figure in Tibetan Buddhism. This move was widely seen as an attempt to assert their control over the selection of the next Dalai Lama. Current Dalai Lama has suggested that the selection of the next Dalai Lama should be decided by the Tibetan people rather than the Chinese government. Critics have argued that the selection of the next Dalai Lama is ultimately a spiritual matter, and that the Chinese government has no right to interfere in the process. Overall, the process of selecting the next Dalai Lama is deeply intertwined with Tibetan religious and political traditions, and has become a focal point of the struggle for Tibetan autonomy and independence. Tibet was traditionally ruled by a theocratic government headed by the Dalai Lama, who served as both the spiritual and temporal leader of the Tibetan people. The Dalai Lama was supported by a council of high-ranking lamas and officials known as the Kashag, who advised him on matters of government and policy. Under the Dalai Lama's rule, Tibet was divided into administrative regions known as zhongs, each of which was governed by a zhongpan, or governor. The zhongs were further divided into smaller units called gawags, which were administered by local officials known as gup, or headmen. The Tibetan government also had a complex system of taxation and land management. Land in Tibet was divided into three categories: land belonging to the government, land belonging to the monasteries, and land belonging to the individual families. Taxes were levied on all three categories of land, and were typically paid in the form of produce or labor. In addition to the formal government structure, Tibet also had a complex system of social and religious hierarchy. Tibetan social hierarchy was divided into three broad categories: the nobility, the commoners, and the slaves or serfs. The nobility held significant political and economic power, while the commoners were primarily farmers and laborers. Slaves or serfs were at the bottom of the social hierarchy and were considered to be property of their masters. Tibetan religious hierarchy was similarly complex, with different levels of monks and lamas holding varying degrees of spiritual authority. At the highest level was the Dalai Lama, who was considered the ultimate authority on all matters of Tibetan Buddhism. Other high-ranking lamas, such as the Panchen Lama and the Karmapa, also held significant spiritual authority. Monks in Tibet. Monks play a central role in Tibetan culture and society, and are highly respected for their religious and spiritual devotion. Monks in Tibet are typically members of the Gelugpa school of Tibetan Buddhism, which is the school of Buddhism that the Dalai Lama belongs to. Monks in Tibet typically begin their religious training at a young age, often as young as 5 or 6 years old. They enter a monastery where they begin their education in Buddhist philosophy, meditation, and ritual. Monks spend many years in the monastery studying and practicing their faith, and may eventually rise to become senior lamas and teachers. In addition to their spiritual duties, monks in Tibet also play important roles in social and cultural life of the Tibetan community. Monks often serve as counselors and mediators, helping to resolve disputes and provide guidance to members of the community. They may also be involved in community events and ceremonies, such as weddings and funerals. Monks in Tibet are typically celibate and must adhere to strict rules regarding the behavior and dress. They wear distinctive robes and often shave their heads as a sign of devotion to their faith. Monks also practice daily meditation and other spiritual practices, and may spend long periods of time in retreat in order to deepen their spiritual practice. Monks play a central role in the cultural and spiritual life of Tibet. They are seen as exemplars of Buddhist virtue and compassion, and are highly respected for their devotion to the faith and their contributions to the community. How to become a monk in Tibet. Becoming a monk in Tibet requires a strong commitment to the Buddhist faith and a willingness to devote one's life to the practice of spirituality. The process of becoming a monk typically begins at a young age, with many monks entering monastic life as children or teenagers. The first step to becoming a monk in Tibet is to join a monastery. Monasteries in Tibet typically accept new monks on a rolling basis and may have specific requirements for admission. Prospective monks may need to undergo a period of probationary study or service, during which they demonstrate their commitment to the monastery and their suitability for monastic life. Once a candidate is accepted into a monastery, they begin a rigorous program of study and spiritual practice. Monks in Tibet typically spend many years in their monastery, studying Buddhist philosophy, meditation, and ritual. They also engage in manual labor and other tasks as part of their training. Monks may receive ordination as novices and eventually as fully ordained monks. The ordination process typically involves a formal ceremony in which the candidate receives a monastic name and vows to live according to the Buddhist precepts. Becoming a monk in Tibet requires a deep commitment to the Buddhist faith and willingness to devote one's life to a spiritual practice. It also requires a strong work ethic and willingness to adhere to the strict rules regarding behavior, dress, and conduct. One child from a family is usually destined to become a monk or nun, bestowing a great sense of honor upon their family. For those who are drawn to the path of the monk, the rewards can be profound, offering a deep sense of purpose and connection to the divine. Lhasa. Lhasa is the capital of Tibet and has a deep and complex history that stretches back over 1,000 years. The city has played a central role in Tibetan culture, religion, and politics. It's considered one of the most important spiritual and cultural centers in the world. The history of Lhasa begins in the 7th century, when the Tibetan king, Songtsen Gampo, built a palace in the city and established Lhasa as the capital of his empire. Over the centuries, Lhasa grew in importance and as a center of trade, pilgrimage, and scholarship. The city became a hub for the spread of Buddhism throughout Tibet, and its monasteries and temples became centers of learning and spiritual practice. During the 17th century, Lhasa experienced a period of rapid growth and expansion under the rule of the 5th Dalai Lama, who oversaw construction of the iconic Potala Palace and established a strong central government in the city. The 5th Dalai Lama's reign was marked by a period of relative stability and prosperity, and Lhasa emerged as a major cultural and spiritual center. In the early 20th century, Lhasa began to experience increasing pressure from outside forces. The city was invaded by British forces in 1904 and later became under the control of the Chinese Communist Party in the 1950s. The Chinese takeover of Tibet brought significant changes to Lhasa, including the destruction of many of its monasteries and temples and the suppression of the Tibetan culture and religion. Despite these challenges, Lhasa remains a vibrant and important cultural center, continues to attract visitors from around the world. The city's historic sites, including the Potala Palace, attract many visitors from around the world. Norbulinka. Norbulinka Palace and Drapang Monastery are two important cultural and historical sites located in Tibet. Norbulinka Palace, located in Lhasa, was built in the 18th century as a summer retreat for the Dalai Lama. The palace complex includes over 370 rooms, with elaborate gardens and a lake. Norbulinka Palace is known for its stunning architecture, which features intricate carvings, colorful murals, and intricate woodwork. Today, the palace serves as a museum, showcasing the rich history and culture of Tibet. Drapang Monastery. Drapang Monastery, located on the outskirts of Lhasa, is one of the largest monasteries in Tibet. Founded in 1416, the monastery was once home to thousands of monks and played an important role in Tibetan religious and political life. Drapang Monastery is known for its stunning architecture, which of course features the typical ornate carvings, intricate murals, and elaborate prayer hall. The monastery is also home to a number of important relics and artifacts, including ancient texts and statues of the Buddha. Norbulinka Palace and Drapang Monastery are important cultural and historical sites in Tibet and are deeply rooted in the region's rich history and culture. These sites serve as a reminder of the important role that religion, art, and architecture have played in shaping Tibetan society over the centuries, and continue to be a vital part of Tibetan culture today. The Potala Palace, Jokhang Temple, and Sera Monastery are three of the most important cultural and historical sites in Tibet. The Potala Palace is located in the heart of Lhasa and is one of the most iconic landmarks in Tibet. The palace was built in the 7th century as the residence of the Dalai Lama and served as the seat of Tibetan government until the 1950s. Today, the Potala Palace is a UNESCO heritage site and is open to visitors as a museum. The palace also houses a number of important relics and artifacts. The Jokhang Temple is located in Lhasa and is one of the most important religious sites in Tibet. The temple was built in the 7th century and is believed to be the oldest surviving temple in Tibet. The temple is a popular destination for pilgrims and tourists alike and is an important symbol of Tibetan spirituality and culture. The Sera Monastery is located on the outskirts of Lhasa and is one of the largest monasteries in Tibet. The monastery was founded in the 15th century and played an important role in Tibetan religious and political life. Sera Monastery is also famous for its debating tradition, where monks engage in lively philosophical debates as part of their spiritual practice. Overall, the Potala Palace, Jokhang Temple, and Sera Monastery are all important cultural and historical sites in Tibet and are deeply rooted in the region's rich history and culture. These sites serve as a reminder of the important role that religion, art, and architecture have played in shaping Tibetan society over the centuries and continue to be a vital part of Tibetan culture today. Art. Traditional forms of art in Tibet are deeply rooted in the region's rich cultural and religious heritage. Three prominent forms of art in Tibet are Thangka painting, wood carving, and sculpting. Thangka painting is a form of traditional Tibetan scroll painting that typically depicts a Buddhist deity or scene. Thangkas are painted on cotton or silk fabric and often feature intricate details and vivid colors. Thangka painting is considered a highly spiritual practice, and paintings are used as visual aids during meditation and religious rituals. The painting technique often involves a combination of drawing, sketching, and coloring, and is typically taught through an apprenticeship system. Wood carving is another important form of traditional Tibetan art. Wood carving is used to create intricate decorative pieces, such as furniture, doors, and window frames, as well as religious objects, such as prayer wheels and statues. Carving technique also involves the use of hand tools, such as chisels and hammers, and requires a high level of skill and precision. Wood carving in Tibet is often passed down through families and is considered a highly respected and valued profession. Sculpting is another important form of traditional Tibetan art. Sculpting is used to create statues of Buddhist deities and other religious figures. The sculptures are typically made from a variety of materials, including wood, clay, bronze, and stone. The sculpting technique often involves a combination of molding, carving, and polishing, and require a high level of skill and precision. Sculpting in Tibet is also often taught through an apprenticeship program and is considered a highly respected and valued profession as well. Danka painting, wood carving, and sculpting are all important forms of traditional Tibetan art and are deeply rooted in the region's rich cultural and religious history. These forms of art continue to be an important part of Tibetan culture and identity and are valued for their beauty, spirituality, and cultural significance. Sky burial is a traditional Tibetan funerary practice where the deceased body is taken to a mountaintop and dismembered into pieces, which are then left to be consumed by vultures and other birds. The practice is rooted in Tibetan Buddhist tradition and is seen as a way to facilitate the process of rebirth by freeing the soul from the physical body. In Tibetan Buddhism, it is believed that the physical body is simply a vessel for the soul, and that the soul must be freed from the body in order to continue on its spiritual journey. Sky burial is seen as a way to facilitate the process by allowing the body to be consumed by birds, which are believed to be messengers of the gods. The practice is also seen as a way to honor the natural cycle of life and death, and to show respect for the animals that consume the body. Sky burial is typically conducted by a lama or a Buddhist monk, who performs a series of rituals and prayers as the body is disarticulated. The lama carefully arranges the body in a specific pattern and then leaves it to be consumed by the birds. Practice is typically conducted in a remote location, away from inhabited areas in order to show respect for the deceased. While sky burial may seem strange or even gruesome to those unfamiliar with Tibetan culture, it is an important part of Tibetan Buddhist tradition and is seen as a way to facilitate the process of rebirth and to honor the natural cycle of life and death. The practice is also seen as a way to show respect for the environment and is deeply rooted in the region's rich cultural and religious heritage. Tibetan Buddhism is a form of Mahayana Buddhism that developed in Tibet and other regions of the Himalayas. It is a complex and diverse religion that incorporates a wide range of practices and beliefs, many of which are unique to the Tibetan culture and historical context. At the heart of Tibetan Buddhism is the concept of karma and reincarnation. It is believed that one's actions in life will determine one's future rebirth, and that the ultimate goal of spiritual practice is to break free from the cycle of rebirth and attain enlightenment. Tibetan Buddhism also places a strong emphasis on the role of meditation and mindfulness in spiritual practice. Practitioners engage in various forms of meditation, such as visualizations and mantras, as a way to develop greater awareness and compassion. Another important aspect to Tibetan Buddhism is the practice of devotional rituals and ceremonies. These may involve offerings of food, flowers, and other symbolic items to the Buddhas and Bodhisattva, as well as the use of prayer wheels, flags, and other sacred objects. Tibetan Buddhism also incorporates a rich system of philosophy and metaphysics, including the concept of emptiness, which holds that all phenomena are ultimately empty of inherent existence. This philosophical framework is used to explain the nature of reality and the workings of the mind, and is an important aspect of Tibetan Buddhist practice. Overall, Tibetan Buddhism is a complex and multifaceted religion that incorporates a wide range of practices and beliefs. It is deeply rooted in the region's rich cultural and historical heritage and continues to be an important aspect of Tibetan identity and spirituality today. Dance and music. Dance and music are important aspects of Tibetan culture, with a rich history and cultural and spiritual significance. In Tibetan culture, dance is often used as a form of spiritual expression and worship. Many traditional dances are associated with Buddhist rituals and ceremonies, and are performed as offerings to the gods and deities. These dances often involve intricate choreography, colorful costumes, and the use of props such as masks and musical instruments. Music is also an integral part of Tibetan culture, with a wide range of instruments and styles used in traditional music. The most iconic instrument in Tibetan music is the dranyen, a type of lute with a long neck and 4 strings. Other musical instruments commonly used in Tibetan music include the flute, drums, cymbals, and bells. Tibetan music often features a distinctive style of singing known as throat singing, where the performer produces multiple tones simultaneously by manipulating the vocal cords and throat muscles. This style of singing is often used in Buddhist chanting and other spiritual practices. The significance of Tibetan dance and music lie in their ability to connect people with their cultural and spiritual heritage. Traditional dances and music are an important part of many Buddhist ceremonies and festivals, and are seen as a way to connect with the divine and with one's own spiritual nature. They also serve as a way to pass on cultural traditions and knowledge from one generation to the next. In recent years, Tibetan dance and music have also gained popularity outside of Tibet, with many performances and festivals held around the world. This has helped to raise awareness of Tibetan culture and spirituality and to promote greater understanding and appreciation of this rich and diverse tradition. Tibetan culture has a diverse history of occupations, many of which are closely tied to the region's unique geography and spiritual traditions. Farming and herding, agricultural and animal husbandry have been important occupations in Tibet for many centuries, with the harsh mountain environment making it difficult to grow crops or support large populations. Tibetan farmers and herders have developed innovative techniques to cultivate the land and raise livestock in this challenging environment. Artisans and craftsmen. Tibetan culture is renowned for its intricate and beautiful arts and crafts, including thangka painting, wood carving, and metalwork. Many Tibetan artisans and craftsmen have owned their skills over generations, creating unique and stunning works of art that reflect the region's rich cultural heritage. Religious leaders and scholars. Religion and spirituality have played a central role in Tibetan culture for centuries, with many people devoting their lives to the study and practice of Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhist monks and nuns are highly respected and revered, and have played important roles as teachers, scholars, and spiritual leaders throughout the region's history. Traders and merchants. Tibet has long been a crossroad for trade and commerce, with traders and merchants traveling across the region to exchange goods and ideas. Tibetan traders have played important roles in bringing goods such as tea, salt, and wood to other parts of Asia, while also importing goods such as silk and spices from other regions. Nomads and yak herders. The high-altitude grasslands of Tibet are home to many nomadic communities who rely on yaks and other livestock for their livelihoods. These communities have a rich cultural heritage and are known for their unique traditions and way of life. The occupations in Tibetan culture are diverse and reflect the unique history, geography, and spirituality of the region. From farming and herding to artistry and religious practice, each occupation plays an important role in shaping the rich and cultural tapestry which is Tibet. The traditional Tibetan government system was a theocracy, with the Dalai Lama serving as both the spiritual and temporal leader of Tibet. This system was based on the principles of Tibetan Buddhism, which emphasized the importance of compassion, wisdom, and nonviolence in all aspects of life. Dalai Lama was the head of the Gelug school of Tibetan Buddhism, which became the dominant sect in Tibet in the 17th century. He was considered to be the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, and was believed to possess the spiritual authority and wisdom necessary to govern Tibet. The Tibetan government was organized into a hierarchy of administrative and religious officials, with the Dalai Lama at the top. The highest political office in Tibet was the Kashag, a council of ministers appointed by the Dalai Lama to assist him in governing the country. Under the Kashag, there were several administrative departments responsible for various aspects of government, including finance, justice, foreign affairs, and defense. The government also maintained a large army, which was responsible for defending Tibet against external threats and maintaining order within the country. Despite its theocratic nature, the Tibetan government was known for its relatively democratic and decentralized system of governance. Local communities were given a great deal of autonomy and were allowed to govern themselves according to their own customs and traditions. After the Chinese invasion of Tibet, the traditional Tibetan government was abolished and replaced with a system of communist rule. Tibetan cuisine reflects the region's harsh mountain environment and unique cultural heritage. Some of the most traditional Tibetan foods include tsampa. Tsampa is a staple food in Tibet, made from roasted barley flour mixed with tea or water to form a dough. It is often eaten with butter or cheese, and is a popular snack for travelers and herders. Yak meat. Yak meat is a common source of protein in Tibet, and is often used in stews and soups. It is rich and flavorful, and is prized for its ability to provide warmth and nourishment in the cold mountain climate. Momas. Momas are a type of dumpling filled with meat or vegetables, and are a popular snack or meal in Tibet. They are often served steamed or fried, and are accompanied by spicy dipping sauces. Butter tea. Butter tea is a traditional Tibetan drink, made from tea leaves, yak butter, and salt. It is often served hot, and is believed to provide warmth and nourishment in the cold mountain climate. Chang. Chang is a fermented barley beer that is a popular beverage in Tibet. It is often served at social gatherings and festivals, and is believed to have medicinal properties. Tentuk. Tentuk is a hand-pulled noodle soup. It is a very common noodle soup in Tibetan cuisine, especially in Amdo, Tibet, where it is served as dinner and sometimes lunch. The main ingredients are wheat flour dough mixed with vegetables and other pieces of mutton or yak meat. In addition to these traditional foods, Tibetan cuisine also features a variety of dairy products, including butters, cheeses, and yogurts. These products are made from milk of yaks, sheep, and goats, and are an important source of nutrition for many Tibetans. Tibetan food is known for its simple comfort food type meals, hearty flavors, and nourishing ingredients, reflecting the region's unique cultural heritage and harsh mountain climate. Flora and fauna. Tibet is home to a diverse range of flora and fauna adapted to its high altitude and harsh mountain environment. Some of the most notable species include rhododendron. These colorful flowering shrubs are found throughout the Tibetan plateau and are particularly common in the mountainous regions of eastern Tibet. Juniper. Juniper trees are a common sight in many parts of Tibet and are valued for their medicinal properties and aromatic wood. Barley. Barley is an important crop in Tibet, and it is grown throughout the region to provide a source of food and income for local communities. Wildflowers. Tibet is home to a wide variety of wildflowers, including primroses, gentians, and edelweiss. Fauna. Yak. The yak is an iconic animal of the Tibetan plateau and is well adapted to the harsh mountain environment. Yaks are used for their meat, milk, and wool, and are used as pack animals. Tibetan antelope. Tibetan antelope is a graceful and swift-footed mammal that is found throughout the Tibetan plateau. It is known for its long, curved horns and shaky coat. Snow leopard. The snow leopard is a rare and elusive predator that is found in the high mountains of Tibet. It is considered to be one of the most endangered big cats in the world. Tibetan gazelle. The Tibetan gazelle is a small and agile herbivore that is found in the grasslands and mountain valleys of Tibet. It is known for its swift running and graceful leaps. The Himalayan black bear. The Himalayan black bear is a large and powerful animal that is found throughout the Himalayan region, including in Tibet. It is known for its thick fur and distinctive white V-shaped chest patch. The flora and fauna of Tibet are an important part of the region's unique and ecological heritage, and are valued for their beauty, diversity, and resilience, adapting to the harsh mountain environment. Housing. Traditional Tibetan housing is known for its unique design, which is well suited to the harsh climate and rugged terrain of the Tibetan plateau. The most common type of housing in Tibet is the stone and mud brick house, which is built to withstand strong winds, heavy snowfall, and extreme temperature fluctuations that are characteristic of the region. Typical Tibetan houses are generally 2 or 3 stories tall. The ground floor are used for storage, and animal housing, and the upper floor is used for living quarters. The houses are often built around a central courtyard, which is used for drying clothes, storing firewood, and other household tasks. The interior of a traditional Tibetan house is typically decorated with colorful murals, religious icons, and other forms of artwork. The furniture is simple and functional, with low tables and cushions used for sitting, and a central stove or hearth is used for cooking and heating. In more remote areas of Tibet, some people still live in traditional nomadic tents known as yurts, which are made of felt and supported by a wooden frame. Yurts are easily transportable and are well suited to a nomadic lifestyle, as they can be easily taken down and moved from place to place. In recent years, there has been a growing trend towards modern housing in Tibet, with many people opting for more Western-style homes made of concrete and brick. However, traditional Tibetan housing continues to play an important role in the region's cultural heritage and is cherished by many Tibetans as a symbol of their unique identity and way of life. Trade has long been an important aspect of Tibetan culture and economy. Historically, Tibet was a hub of trade between China, India, and Central Asia, and goods such as salt, wool, gold, and silk were highly sought after. In ancient times, the trade routes that ran through Tibet were collectively known as the Silk Road, and they played a crucial role in the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures between East and West. Tibetan traders were known for their shrewd business acumen and their ability to navigate the difficult terrain of the Himalayas. Today, Tibet continues to be an important center of trade and commerce, with goods such as yak wool, handmade carpets, and traditional Tibetan artwork being highly valued by collectors and tourists alike. Many Tibetan communities also rely on trade as a means of supporting themselves and their families, with local markets and trading posts serving as important economic hubs. In recent years, the Chinese government has invested heavily in modernizing Tibet's infrastructure, including its transportation networks and communication systems. This has helped to open up new opportunities for trade and commerce, and has made it easier for Tibetans to connect with customers and markets, both within China and around the world. However, Tibet remains a region with a complex political and economic history, and its trade relations continue to be shaped by a range of cultural, historical, and geopolitical factors. Tibetan warfare. Tibet has a long history of warfare and conflict, which has shaped its culture and society in many ways. The region's rugged terrain and harsh climate have historically made it difficult to conquer, and as a result, Tibet has often been able to maintain its independence and autonomy, even in the face of external threats. One of the most significant conflicts in Tibet's history was the invasion by the Mongol army in the 13th century. The Mongols were able to conquer Tibet relatively easily, and they established a puppet government in the region. However, the Mongol rule was short-lived, and Tibet soon regained its independence and was ruled by the Dalai Lamas for many centuries. In the 20th century, Tibet was once again a site of conflict, this time between the Chinese government and Tibetan independent activists. In 1950, China invaded Tibet and began a process of political and cultural assimilation, which was resisted by many Tibetans. In 1959, a failed uprising against Chinese rule led to the flight of the Dalai Lama and thousands of other Tibetans into exile. Since then, Tibet has been a site of ongoing conflict between Chinese authorities and Tibetan activists, seeking greater autonomy and independence. In recent years, tensions have eased somewhat, with the Chinese government taking steps to improve infrastructure and economic development in the region. However, the issue of Tibetan autonomy and independence remains a contentious one, with many Tibetans continuing to call for greater political and cultural freedom. The smells of a Tibetan marketplace. The smells of a Tibetan marketplace can be quite varied and unique, with a blend of earthy, spicy, and floral scents filling the air. The aromas can change depending on the time of year, the location, and specific goods being sold. In the winter months, the air can be filled with the smell of burning juniper wood, which is often used for heating and cooking. In the warmer months, The air may be scented with the fragrance of wildflowers and herbs, such as sage and lavender, that are grown in the region. In the marketplace, the smell of spices and herbs can be particularly strong, as vendors sell a variety of traditional Tibetan foods and medicines. Spices such as cumin, coriander, and turmeric are commonly used in Tibetan cuisine and can be found in the marketplace in their raw and powdered forms. Medicinal herbs and roots such as ginseng and licorice are also sold for their healing properties. The smell of yak butter, a staple of Tibetan cuisine, can also be detected in the marketplace. This rich, creamy butter is used in a variety of dishes, including tea and traditional Tibetan tsampa. Animals and livestock would have also added to the other more pleasant, fragrant scents, wafting and mixing throughout the thin mountain air. Overall, the smells of a Tibetan marketplace can be a feast for the senses, providing a glimpse into the unique culture and culinary traditions of the region. Tibetan clothing. Traditional Tibetan clothing reflects the region's harsh climate and rugged terrain. Clothing is designed to be practical, durable, and comfortable in the challenging conditions of the Tibetan plateau. For men, the traditional Tibetan outfit consists of a long-sleeved shirt and trousers made from thick wool, cotton, with a wide belt made of leather or fabric to hold everything in place. A long heavy coat or robe is worn over the top, with a fur or wool-lined collar to protect against the cold. Men also wear a felt hat or cap, and sturdy boots or shoes with thick soles to provide traction on the rocky terrain. For women, the traditional outfit is similar, but often more ornate and colorful. A long flowing dress or skirt made of silk or cotton is worn, along with a matching blouse and jacket. The garments are often decorated with intricate embroidery and beading, with bright colors and bold patterns. Women also wear jewelry such as necklaces, bracelets, and earrings made from precious stones and metals. In addition to these traditional garments, Tibetan people also wear modern clothing, particularly in urban areas. However, traditional clothing is still commonly worn on special occasions, such as weddings, festivals, and religious ceremonies. Overall, Tibetan clothing is designed to be practical, functional, and comfortable in the challenging conditions of the region. The garments reflect the unique culture and traditions of the Tibetan people and are an important part of their cultural identity. Tibetan mythology. Tibetan mythology is a rich and complex system of beliefs that evolved over thousands of years. It incorporates elements from various sources, including indigenous Tibetan religion, Buddhism, Bon, and Hinduism. One of the key figures in Tibetan mythology is Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche. He is considered the founder of Tibetan Buddhism and is credited with bringing Buddhism to Tibet in the 8th century. Padmasambhava is believed to have been a powerful magician and spiritual leader who performed numerous miracles and tamed the spirits and demons of Tibet. Another important figure in Tibetan mythology is Tara, a female deity who is associated with compassion and protection. She is often depicted as a green or white goddess with multiple arms and eyes, and is revered as a powerful protector and healer. The Yeti, or abominable snowman, is a legendary creature that is said to inhabit the Himalayan region, including Tibet. The Yeti is described as a large, hairy, black creature that is believed to be a relative of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, like in Western indigenous cultures, such as the Salish in British Columbia, Canada. While there is no scientific evidence to support the existence of the Yeti, it remains a popular legend in Tibetan mythology and has inspired numerous expeditions and investigations by cryptozoologists. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is a text that is central to Tibetan mythology and religious practice. It is believed to be a guide for the souls of the dead as they navigate the intermediate state between death and rebirth. The book includes instructions for meditations and rituals that are intended to help the soul achieve enlightenment and avoid rebirth in the lower realms of existence. Tibetan mythology is a rich and diverse system of beliefs that reflects the unique culture and traditions of the Tibetan people. The mythology incorporates elements from various sources and is characterized by its colorful legends and powerful deities. Tibet has a long history of innovation and invention, particularly in the fields of astronomy, medicine, and metallurgy. Some of the notable innovations and inventions from Tibet include Tibetan medicine. Tibetan medicine is a traditional system of medicine that has been practiced in Tibet for thousands of years. It is based on the principles of Buddhist philosophy and incorporates a holistic approach to healing that encompasses the mind, body, and spirit. Tibetan medicine includes a wide range of herbal remedies, dietary therapies, and other natural treatments that are used to treat a variety of illnesses and ailments. Prayer wheels. Prayer wheels are cylindrical devices that are used in Tibetan Buddhism to accumulate merit and purify negative karma. They are typically made from metal, wood, or stone, and are inscribed with Buddhist mantras and prayers. The prayer wheel is spun clockwise by hand, and it's believed that each rotation of the wheel is equivalent to reciting the prayer or mantra inscribed on it. Tibetan singing bowls. Tibetan singing bowls are a type of musical instrument that are used in meditation and healing practices. They are made from a combination of metals, including copper, tin, and iron, and produce a unique sound when struck or played. The sound of the singing bowl is believed to have a calming effect on the mind and body, and is often used in sound healing therapies. Tibetan carpets. Tibetan carpets are renowned for their intricate designs and high quality. They are typically made from wool or silk and are hand knotted using traditional weaving techniques that have been passed down through generations. Tibetan carpets are known for their durability and often used in high traffic areas such as temples and monasteries. Tibet has a rich tradition of innovation and invention that has contributed greatly to the cultural, scientific heritage of the region. Tibetan astronomy. Tibetan astronomy is a branch of astronomy that originated in Tibet and has been practiced for over 1,000 years. It is based on the principles of Buddhist philosophy and incorporates a unique system of astronomical calculations and observations that are based on the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. One of the most important aspects of Tibetan astronomy is the use of the lunar calendar, which is based on the cycles of the moon rather than the solar calendar used in Western countries. The Tibetan lunar calendar is divided into 12 months, each of which corresponds to a particular animal in the Tibetan zodiac. Tibetan astronomers also developed a unique system of planetary calculations that are based on the movements of the 5 visible planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These calculations were used to determine the positions of the planets in the sky, as well as to predict future astronomical events, such as eclipses and comets. In addition to astronomical calculations, Tibetan astronomy also includes a system of astrology that is based on the principles of Buddhist philosophy. This system incorporates the concept of karma, or the idea that our actions have an impact on our future. Tibetan astrologers use a person's birth date and time to determine their astrological sign and to make predictions about their future. Tibetan astronomy is a complex and intricate system that has contributed greatly to the cultural and scientific heritage of Tibet. It continues to be studied and admired by scholars around the world for its unique insights into the movements of the heavens and its connection to Buddhist philosophy. Superstitions. Like many cultures around the world, Tibet has a rich tradition of superstitions that have been passed down through generations. These superstitions reflect unique beliefs and values of Tibetan culture and are often closely tied to Buddhism and other spiritual practices. Some common Tibetan superstitions include belief in reincarnation. Tibetans believe that after death, the soul is reincarnated into another body. This belief is tied to the concept of karma and the idea that a person's actions in life will impact their next incarnation. Its beliefs facilitate that any sentient being may be a former ancestor or fellow Buddhist. Use of amulets and talismans. Many Tibetans wear amulets or carry talismans for protection and good luck. These can include items like prayer beads, blessed stones, or images of deities. Fear of certain animals. In Tibetan culture, certain animals are considered to be bad luck or even evil. For example, black cats, snakes, and spiders are often viewed with suspicion. Taboos around death. Tibetans have a number of taboos and superstitions around death and dying. For example, it is believed that cutting the hair or nails of a deceased person could cause harm to the living. Tibetan culture is rich in stories and beliefs about spirits and ghosts. They can include benevolent spirits that protect households and families, as well as malevolent spirits that cause harm. While some of these superstitions may seem strange or unfamiliar to outsiders, they play an important role in Tibetan culture and are deeply rooted in the tradition and beliefs of the Tibetan people. Conclusion. Tibetan culture is rich and diverse, with a long and complex history that has been shaped by a range of factors, including geography, religion, and political forces. Despite centuries of conflict and outside influence, Tibetans have managed to maintain a distinct cultural identity that is reflected in their unique art forms, music, cuisine, festivals, religious, and spiritual practices. Its fascinating blend of indigenous traditions, Buddhist practices, and influences from neighboring regions such as China, Nepal, and India. From the awe-inspiring peaks of the Himalayas to the vibrant marketplace in Lhasa, Tibet is a place of extraordinary beauty and complexity, and its people have much to teach us about resilience, perseverance, and the enduring power of cultural heritage. Despite the challenges that Tibetans have faced over the years, their culture continues to thrive and evolve, and we can only hope that it will continue to do so for generations to come. We have come to the end of our story. You may now close your eyes, go to sleep, and drift off. Until next time, until our next adventure. Farewell, goodbye, au revoir.